At an ordinary high school, there was one very extraordinary student. He wasn't famous for scoring high, but for choosing not to. A boy with a mind so sharp, he could control his grades with surgical precision, while everyone else desperately chased top marks. He aimed for the bottom 0, to be exact, and so he earned the legendary title, the King of Failing Grades. But that title was about to be challenged. One day, the teacher stood before the class and announced an upcoming academic quiz show. The school would be selecting one student to represent them, a shot at pride, a shot at glory. That's when Dalpo, the king himself, decided it was time. Time to drop the mask and reveal what he'd been hiding all along. As the teacher handed out the test papers, the room grew tense with concentration. Pen's scribbled pages flipped, but Dalpo, he lounged back in his chair, arms folded, eyes half-lidded, completely relaxed. He didn't even touch his pen. Minutes ticked by, then came the announcement. Only 10 minutes left. Dalpo slowly sat up, with unhurried ease. He picked up his pen, scribbled his name, and began. The results came in. The teachers one by one began grading, only to frown in disappointment. Mediocre scores, nothing impressive. Then came a 92, then a 96. A few teachers nodded in approval, thinking they'd seen the best. "Let's stop here," someone said. But the homeroom teacher paused, his brow furrowed, eyes locked on the next paper. Silence fell. It was a perfect score. The other teachers leaned in. Who could it be? Then came the name. Dalpo, the classroom genius who had never scored above a 0, had just outshined the entire school. The news spread like wildfire. Students buzzed in disbelief. Shock turned into suspicion. Chan-Su, the class's resident top scorer, felt his crown slipping, and he wasn't about to lose without a fight. He rallied his loyal followers, particularly his fan club of swooning girls, and launched a whisper campaign. Dalpo didn't earn that score. He must have cheated, maybe even stolen the test beforehand. Rumors flew. Whispers turned to glares. Accusations followed Dalpo through every hallway. Even the homeroom teacher called him out right in front of the class. "You better not have cheated. Don't disgrace yourself further." But Dalpo stood tall, calm, unshaken. "I didn't cheat," he said quietly, "and I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do." But the school had already made up its mind. Everyone believed he was guilty. Everyone, except one person, his niece Choi In-ha. In the end, the teacher ignored Dalpo's score and selected Chan-Su to represent the school. And just like that, the stage was set. Chan-Su, smug and triumphant, won the first round of the quiz show, riding high. He turned to the cameras and boldly confessed his feelings for In-ha, his longtime crush. The class erupted in applause, but In-ha didn't look thrilled. Her eyes quietly drifted to Dalpo's empty seat. Then came a turning point in front of the entire class. The homeroom teacher demanded that Dalpo apologize. "You cheated." He insisted, "Own up to it." Dalpo refused. His voice steady, he looked the teacher dead in the eye. "Do you have proof?" he asked. "Anything besides gossip?" The teacher, now red with anger, snapped back. "The whole school is talking about it. Isn't that proof enough?" Dalpo's gaze shifted to the back of the room. A female teacher stood there, casually printing documents, and in that moment, Dalpo's expression changed from frustration to mischief. "I'll make you a deal," he said coolly. "If I walk out of this room, I'll tell everyone you're having an affair with her." The room froze. "Then you can prove that's not true." Gasps echoed through the classroom. "He did what?" The female teacher cried out. The homeroom teacher stood in stunned silence, his jaw hanging open. Dalpo rose slowly from his seat, turned toward the door, and said with biting sarcasm, "You're assuming it's not true, so go on, prove it." And just like that, the king of failing grades walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and a taste of poetic justice. Meanwhile, In-ha had made up her mind. She had to clear her uncle's name. Without hesitation, she rushed to his room and started tearing through his things. Comic books were everywhere. But then something caught her eye. An English textbook, stamped with the town library's logo. Strange. Dalpo didn't look like someone who read anything more than comics. Curious, she headed to the library. What she found there stopped her in her tracks. Every single subject, from physics to philosophy, held books bearing one name on the borrowing slips: Dalpo. Piles of them. He had borrowed and read more than anyone she'd ever known. This man, her so-called failing uncle, was hiding a mind sharper than anyone could imagine. Determined, In-ha began gathering the slips, photocopying, compiling, creating a mountain of evidence to prove to the world that Dalpo wasn't a cheat. He was a genius in disguise. While she was racing against time, Dalpo arrived at the quiz show headquarters for the preliminary rounds. Ironically, his status as the lowest-ranked student landed him a spot without competition, but fate had a twisted sense of humor. His opponent, none other than the school's golden boy, Chonsu. The first question came quickly. For every 43 people, one suffers from a peculiar condition. They hiccup whenever they lie. This syndrome is named after which animated character? Dalpo didn't flinch. He tapped his buzzer, choosing to use his only lifeline, and picked Chonsu. Everyone stared. "If I beat you in this round," Dalpo said coolly, eyes locked on his rival, "you take 10 slaps from me." Chonsu scoffed. What, he sneered. Then it clicked. This is about Inha, isn't it? You're willing to burn your one lifeline just for revenge. A smirk curled across his lips. You really think you'll win? Dalpo didn't blink. Pinocchio, he answered. Correct. The host congratulated him and asked if he had ever encountered someone with this rare condition. Dalpo glanced toward the audience. I have, he said. Someone very special. Someone who hiccups every time they lie. We called her the Lion King. Laughter erupted through the studio. Eyes turned to Inha, whose face flushed red with fury. That guy was going to pay. The next question came fast. According to the 60-year kanji cycle, what year is this? Dalpo froze. The words echoed in his ears, unlocking memories buried deep in his past. He wasn't always Dalpo once. He was Ki-ham-young, a child prodigy hailed for his brilliance. He lived happily with his older brother Jae-myung and their loving parents. His father, a respected fire chief, was their family's pride. Then everything changed. A fire erupted at a local factory. Ham-young's father led the rescue mission after a man reported 2 workers trapped inside. But the man never mentioned the most crucial detail. There were hazardous materials stored in the building. Acting quickly, the fire chief led his team inside. But what he didn't know was that the workers had already escaped, and worse, they were the ones who caused the fire, then disaster. The chemicals ignited. The factory exploded in a raging inferno that devoured everything in its path. The fire roared through the night until only ashes remained of the 9 firefighters who had gone in. Only 8 bodies were found. And then someone claimed they saw a figure soaked in rain stumbling away from the wreckage. A man who looked just like Dalpo's father. As news of the fire broke, the media descended like vultures. But they weren't there for truth. They were there for scandal. Sensational headlines spun a tragic accident into a whirlwind of blame and suspicion. Shockingly, the public bought into it. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't question the facts. They simply believed that Dalpo's father, the fire chief who had died trying to save lives, was somehow responsible for the deaths of his men. Dalpo and his older brother Jae-myung were swarmed by reporters. Their cameras flashing, voices shouting for answers they didn't want to hear. Among them was one particularly ruthless journalist, a woman who would stop at nothing to fuel the flames. She took footage from an interview, chopped it up, and spliced together a single soundbite that sealed their fate.
I'm absolutely certain the man I saw was the missing fire chief.
She declared on national television. The broadcast ignited an inferno of public outrage. Just like that, the grieving family of a hero was branded as criminals. They were spat on in the streets, their home vandalized, their dignity stolen, crushed under the weight of shame and hatred. Dalpo's mother took him to watch the fireworks one final time. It was meant to be a farewell. He didn't understand that night. She ended her life. When Jae-myung arrived at the scene, all that remained was a single shoe and a farewell note. Soaked in grief, his heart shattered. Enraged and powerless, he lashed out at the media that had murdered their mother with their lies. But they didn't care. They only wanted the next headline. What no one knew was that Dalpo hadn't died. He had been rescued by an elderly man with dementia who believed Dalpo was his own son, lost at sea decades earlier.
This is my younger son, Dalpo.
The old man introduced proudly. And this is my granddaughter, Choi Inha. Dalpo was stunned. In an instant, he had gained a brother nearly 20 years older and a niece the same age as himself. At first, the brother was suspicious, but after seeing Dalpo's devotion to their aging father, he accepted him without question. Dalpo, deeply grateful for the second chance at life, kept his true identity a secret. Over time, their bond became genuine. They became a real family. But fate wasn't finished with its cruel games. One afternoon while helping Inha fix her TV, Dalpo stumbled upon a horrifying truth. The reporter who had ruined his family, the one who manipulated the story, who drove his mother to suicide, was Inha's mother. The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. His demeanor toward Inha changed overnight. He teased her, provoked her, kept his distance, but his heart wouldn't listen. They had grown up together. He had watched over her, protected her, and somewhere along the way, he had fallen for her. So when he heard about Inha's reckless bet with the school's top student, he didn't hesitate. He entered the quiz show, and he crushed his rival. With that mission accomplished, Dalpo started his journey home. Rain poured from the sky as if echoing his emotions. Inha, knowing he'd never carry an umbrella, ran back to the village. She waited at the bus stop, soaked and shivering. She eventually dozed off from exhaustion. Dalpo found her there. Seeing her asleep, drenched from head to toe, he realized just how long she must have waited. Quietly, he approached. His umbrella was broken, nearly useless. So instead, he placed 2 plastic funnels on her head like makeshift horns and stared at her with mock sternness. Don't get the wrong idea. He mumbled, "Grandpa told me to come get you. He was worried you'd get wet. It's not like I care or anything. Really, but deep down, he cared deeply. Even so, he knew a relationship between them was impossible. She still loved her mother while he could never forgive the woman who had destroyed his family. Years passed. Dalpo graduated high school and took up a job as a taxi driver to support the family that saved him. Inha chased her dream of becoming a reporter, but her Pinocchio Syndrome, a condition that caused her to hiccup every time she told a lie, proved to be a major obstacle in a profession built on masks, omissions, and sometimes deceit. One morning, Ina asked Dalpo for a ride to yet another job interview, her 35th attempt at landing a position as a reporter. Dalpo, lost in a blissful dream, accidentally grabbed her skirt instead of his blanket. Pervert Ina shrieked, and without hesitation, she delivered a solid punch to his eye. Their grandfather, hearing the commotion, came storming in, wielding a spoon like a warrior's sword, scolding Ina for striking her uncle. Feeling utterly defeated, she sat down, sulking, and finished her breakfast. The two then set out for the interview location. As the tension in Ina's stomach grew, Dalpo noticed her nervousness and casually handed her 5,000 won, telling her to buy a lucky charm. Then, out of the blue, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother, the woman who had vanished from her life 13 years ago. Ina's eyes welled with tears as she showed it to Dalpo, who remained stone-faced, unable to hide the bitterness he still felt toward the woman who destroyed his family. At the interview building, Ina rushed in and flung her arms wide open, ready for a heartwarming reunion, but her mother's expression was as cold as ever, and worse, the interviewers, upon discovering Ina's Pinocchio Syndrome, immediately dismissed her as unfit for a reporting career. Ina couldn't stay silent. She fired back, saying, "Shouldn't a reporter who literally can't lie be the most trustworthy of all?" But her mother, icy and calculating, wasn't impressed. She presented a challenge. If Ina could complete a simple task without hiccuping, she'd earn the job. Predictably, Ina failed. Her mother turned away, delivering the final blow. Ina didn't have what it took to be a reporter. Staggering outside in disbelief, Ina waited for her mother and finally asked the one question haunting her. "Did you send that text?" Her mother looked confused. She had changed her number long ago. That meant someone else had sent it. Ina was crushed. For 13 long years, she had clung to the hope that her mother still cared. "Mom, I missed you," she whispered through trembling lips. Her mother gave her a brief mechanical hug, only to follow it up with a heart-piercing reply, "I've been too busy to miss you." As Ina walked away, her tears hidden behind a broken heart, she called the number that had sent the message. "Why?" she asked. "Why give me hope just to take it away?" But the voice on the other end said nothing. Meanwhile, across the street, Dalpo saw Inha in tears. His heart ached to run to her, to wrap her in comfort. But traffic held him back. He called her phone. But Inha, not wanting him to see her broken, texted back, "I'm with my mom. I can't talk." Dalpo knew it wasn't true, but he chose not to expose her lie. He simply replied, "How's it going?" Inha lied again, saying her mom had treated her well. Dalpo, not wanting to intrude, began to drive away, but halfway down the road, his gut told him to turn back. When he returned, Inha was already gone. He spotted her mother standing on the curb, waiting for a taxi. The sight of her brought a flood of resentment. Yet suppressing the storm inside him, he pulled up and silently offered her a ride. Meanwhile, Inha was spiraling, heartbroken and disillusioned. She gathered all her books, notes, and dreams. The entire weight of her aspirations. Back at home, Dalpo's grandfather immediately sensed something was off with Inhu. Her eyes dull, her energy gone. He mentioned it to Dalpo, who didn't waste a second rushing to the rooftop, panic tightening his chest, fearing the worst. He burst through the door only to find it empty. His heart skipped. Then he heard a faint sob and spotted Inhu's feet peeking out from behind a wall. Relief flooded him as he approached. She tried to hide her face in shame, but Dalpo was already there, gently telling her he knew everything, and that only made her more ashamed. The truth cut deep. He had once sacrificed his own education just so she could chase her dreams, and here she was, ready to burn it all down. Overcome with guilt, she broke down, admitting she never wanted to be a burden. But rejection after rejection had chipped away at her confidence, and now she just wanted to give up. She clutched the books with trembling hands, ready to torch them and be done with it, but Dalpo snatched them away, his voice firm. "Do you really want to quit?" she insisted. She did, but her sobs betrayed the truth. Frustrated, she lunged for the books again, but this time, Dalpo didn't let go. His eyes locked with hers, and he made a bold promise. "Let me help you become a reporter." From that day, Dalpo immersed himself in study, determined to prepare Inhe for her next interview. He had a gift, a photographic memory, but even gifts need polishing. Every day, they trained together on the rooftop, like two soldiers preparing for battle by night. Dalpo studied under the dim glow of a hidden light, while the rest of the house slept. When he heard his grandfather's footsteps, he quickly stashed away the books and slipped back into bed. But his grandfather already knew. The old man had quietly discovered Dalpo's nightly efforts, and though he said nothing, he watched his sleeping grandson with pride, gently brushing his hair. Then one day, an idea lit up in the grandfather's eyes. The next morning, he marched Dalpo to the barber with a fashion magazine in hand. Pointing to a chic, stylish cut, Dalpo emerged from the salon, reborn. Clean-cut, confident, and shockingly handsome. To complete the look, his grandfather presented him with a suit, tie, and leather shoes. Dalpo looked into the mirror, stunned. Who is this guy? On the way home, he kept checking his reflection, feeling oddly detached from his goofy past. But the biggest reveal came when his grandfather confessed the truth a year after rescuing Dalpo. He had realized he wasn't his long-lost son, but he pretended not to know just to keep him safe. "Don't worry about anything," the old man said with a loving smile. "Just live your life to the fullest." Tears welled in Dalpo's eyes, and he threw his arms around his grandfather, vowing he'd always be his son forever, and always. When they got home, Dalpo's older brother opened the door, stared at the sharply dressed man, and blinked in confusion. "Who's the guest?" he asked. The old man chuckled. "This isn't a guest, it's your brother." Just then, Inha walked in and froze. "Is that really you, uncle?" she gasped. The grandfather beamed like a proud father, bragging about his son's movie star looks. Dalpo's brother, meanwhile, noticed the stunned look on his daughter's face and the glow in her eyes, and suddenly recalled his own boast from the day before about her being the cutest and prettiest girl in town. Looking at her now, all frumpy beside the dashing Dalpo, he couldn't help but blurt out, "You really need to start dressing better." Ina rolled her eyes at her dad's fashion complaints, reminding him he'd once said she was more beautiful than Miss Korea. He groaned. "Yeah, well, that was because I was drunk." He huffed. He went on to scold her for her lack of style, warning her that people might look down on her like that. Fed up, Ina shot back that nobody could possibly look down on her, especially not Dalpo. After all, he'd never seen her as a woman, and she'd never seen him as a man. But what Dalpo overheard was only that part, the words echoing painfully as he slowly closed his bedroom door. He never heard the rest of her sentence. The part where she admitted to herself that someone as talented, kind, and now downright handsome as Dalpo might actually not be such a bad option after all. The boy who used to be all goofy hair and baggy clothes had transformed into a man, and she couldn't unsee it anymore. With the reporter interviews fast approaching, Dalpo poured 3 years of broadcast journalism study into one intense month, coaching Ina day and night. When her 36th interview finally arrived, Dalpo found himself face-to-face with his biggest competition in love, Bongju, aka Bayamo. And as fate would have it, Bayamo was the mysterious person who had been texting Ina all these years, using her mother's old phone. Unaware that she wasn't actually talking to her mom, Ina had unknowingly poured her heart out for over a decade, and Bayamo had fallen for the girl behind those heartfelt words. Hearing she was applying for the same broadcast station, Bayamo followed her all the way to the interview. The preliminary round kicked off, and as luck would have it, all 3 of them were placed in the same group. Bayamo couldn't stop glancing at Ina, and Dalpo wasn't having it. Smoothly sliding in between them with a subtle shoulder, he stood his ground, as if declaring this territory is taken. The interviewers gave the candidates a task, watch a short video, then report on it in order of their assigned numbers. Dalpo was up first, the worst possible position in this kind of format. He gave a clean, factual report. Then the next 2 candidates built on it, adding flavor and flair, making it sound much more dynamic. When Ina's turn came, she mirrored Dalpo's no-nonsense style. delivering a straightforward account of what she'd seen. The interviewers seemed unimpressed. They asked why she hadn't spiced it up a bit. Ina replied honestly, she couldn't lie. Just as she was about to mention her Pinocchio syndrome, Dalpo suddenly stepped forward. So did Biamo. They both declared themselves reporters. The tension in the room shifted. Dalpo spoke first, stating that journalists should prioritize facts and resist the urge to exaggerate or manipulate information for effect. Biamo backed him up, adding that it was far better to report nothing at all than to spread false information. The interviewers leaned back, intrigued, as the round came to a close. Outside, while waiting for the results, Ina sat down dejected. She felt like she'd blown her chance. Dalpo sat beside her, offering comfort. "If we can't be peas in a pod," he said with a small smile, "then it's better to fail together." Ina looked up, her eyes fierce. "No way," she snapped. "One pea is better than two." He blinked, stunned by what she'd just said, and she immediately clapped her hands over her mouth. Dalpo leaned in, eyebrow raised. "One pea, huh? What's that supposed to mean?" Ina blushed and tried to dodge the moment, but Dalpo stepped in front of her, cornering her with a teasing smirk. She stammered, "I meant one pea is better than two peas together and far apart." Dalpo chuckled, clearly enjoying her flustered state, but then with a gentler tone, he added, "Being apart wouldn't be meaningful at all anyway." Zhou watched silently from the sidelines, witnessing the tension and closeness between Dalpo and Inha. An unspoken bond that was growing deeper by the day. Moments later, the list of successful candidates was posted, and the crowd surged forward. There it was, Tree 44, Bom Dalpo and Inha. All three had passed. The trio could hardly contain their joy as they dialed home to share the news. Their grandfather was over the moon, showering them with praise and encouraging them to keep going strong. But not everyone took the news so lightly. Dalpo's brother sat beside their grandfather, his face clouding over with anxiety. His imagination ran wild with unwanted images. Dalpo and Inha tying each other's ties in the morning, sharing breakfasts and stolen glances. Irritated and jealous, he hurled a pillow across the room in frustration. But soon, the mood shifted for everyone as the topic for the next interview round was revealed. Dalpo froze. The subject was a fire accident. His father's fire accident, the one that had taken his father's life, shattered his family and left behind nothing but pain. 13 years after the blaze, his father's remains had finally been found. The headlines that year had crushed them, branding his father a disgrace. Now, here it was, brought back like a ghost, served as a debate topic. Who was at fault? Dalpo's heart crumbled under the weight of it. He had spent years believing that his father had simply abandoned him and his brother. That was how he had managed to live peacefully with his grandfather. But now he knew the truth. His father had been wrongly accused. He had never abandoned them. As the debate began, other candidates eagerly gave their opinions. Dalpo clenched his fists, fighting to keep his anger buried. Then Inha spoke. She calmly argued that the responsibility lay with the person who had the Pinocchio Syndrome because everyone trusted his testimony. He couldn't lie. His words shaped the investigation, swayed public opinion, and led to a cascade of tragedy. But in the end, she concluded no one was really to blame. It had been an unfortunate accident, nothing more. Inha meant no harm, but her words felt like daggers to Dalpo. He snapped. His voice trembled with a storm of grief and fury. "How can you say no one is to blame?" he demanded. "Sure, Pinocchio can't lie, but what about the reporters? Didn't they have a responsibility to verify the facts before broadcasting them? Reporters' words weigh more heavily than others. Shouldn't they be more cautious?" His gaze burned, but they weren't. They didn't even try. Inha sat stunned. She had never seen him like this, and now she understood. To him, her words weren't just part of a debate. They were personal. They were betrayal. Dalpo saw it too, the look on her face, and in that moment he finally understood why people with Pinocchio syndrome should never become reporters. Because as long as they believed they were right, they wouldn't hiccup, even if they were wrong. Heartbroken Inha walked out of the room without a word. She didn't care about the rest of the interview. Bumjo followed in the elevator. He tried to comfort her. She nodded silently. The pain etched into her face. She had hoped Dalpo would back her up, maybe even defend her, but instead, he'd torn her down. Bumjo hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do you like him?" Inha's eyes widened. "Of course not." She replied too quickly, but her tears betrayed her. Meanwhile, Dalpo climbed to the rooftop alone. There, as the wind howled and the city lights flickered below, he finally broke down. He cried for the truth, for his father, for the years lost to a lie. Elsewhere, Dalpo's older brother Jaemyoung having just laid their father to rest, was consumed by something darker: vengeance. He had identified the man with Pinocchio Syndrome, the one whose testimony had fueled the lie, and he wasn't going to let it go. Jong staged a scene pretending to faint and accidentally picking up the man's wallet. Then, using the address inside, he lured him to a remote location. "You left your wallet here," he said, pointing casually near an open manhole. As the man leaned over to look, Jong struck. He slammed the heavy cover shut and dragged over bricks to weigh it down. The man's desperate cries echoed from below, but Jong didn't flinch. Not this time. Not after everything. Ina, burdened by her relentless Pinocchio syndrome, had endured a staggering 36 failed interviews, crushed by disappointment. She took up a job at a supermarket, a position arranged by her well-meaning father. One afternoon, as she packed groceries, she sighed to a passing customer. "Is it fair? He studied for only a month and passed, while I prepared for 3 years and failed." Little did she know, the customer was Bum Joe, the ever-gentle admirer harboring a secret crush on her, convinced Dalpo was her uncle. Bum Joe tried his best to comfort her with awkward sweetness and kind words. Meanwhile, back at home, Ina caught sight of Dalpo discussing work with her grandfather. Her frustrations boiled over. She hadn't forgotten Dalpo's firm assertion that she couldn't be a reporter. Still fuming, she plotted a petty revenge mission. Without missing a beat, she took his toothbrush, dipped it into the toilet, then placed it neatly back in the holder. But that wasn't enough. The moment Dalpo reached for his brush, she nonchalantly tossed his toothpaste into the trash, leaving him completely bewildered. The next day, Bum Joe showed up again at Ina's workplace, offering friendly support, but this time, so did her cold and distant mother, the woman whose absence had shaped much of Ina's life. But she wasn't there for a reunion. Her company's public image was crumbling, and she saw Ina's Pinocchio Syndrome as the perfect PR tool. Ina immediately refused, disgusted by the idea, but her mother wasn't done. She leaned on emotional manipulation, urging Ina to reconsider later. Holding the business card, Ina stared at it. Torn wasn't becoming a reporter her dream. That night, back at home, she ran into Dalpo in the elevator. Without a word, she pulled him to the rooftop. Her determination was clear. "I want to cure my hiccups," she said, and then she blurted it out, "I like you." Dalpo froze, caught completely off guard. He'd loved her silently, but hearing her say it sent a jolt through him. And yet fear quickly took over because behind Ina stood a truth he could never ignore. Her mother had destroyed his family. She was the reason his mother had died. The weight of that hatred made everything impossible, and as much as Ina felt for Dalpo, she too knew their situation was hopeless. To the world, he was still her uncle, and love in that light was a sin, so she decided then and there she'd try to forget him, find someone else who could offer her peace. She turned and walked away. After much inner turmoil, Ina called her mother and accepted the job offer. What she didn't know was that Bum Joe, driven by his unwavering affection, had also joined the same company, following her into the world of journalism. And so, Ina finally became a reporter. But fate wasn't about to make it easy. She and Dalpo were now competitors, working for rival news networks. That evening, when Dalpo returned home, he was greeted by the warm aroma of beef tripe stew. But the sight triggered something else, a vivid flashback to a gruesome crime scene from his coverage. Overwhelmed, he rushed to the bathroom to vomit. His family watched with concern, unsure what had just happened. Later, back in his room, Dalpo found that Ina had left a bottle of stomach medicine with a note gently reminding him to take care of himself. Then, his grandfather entered with another bottle, echoing the same concern. And moments later, his brother walked in too, holding yet another identical bottle. 3 bottles, 3 worried hearts. Dalpo's chest tightened with warmth. Despite everything, these people cared for him deeply. Meanwhile, the once goofy duo of Dalpo and Ina were now fierce rivals, assigned to the same police station. Beat Dalpo, paired with the gruff and experienced YGN Sr., while Ina was teamed up with the ever-optimistic Bum Joe. And it didn't take long for reality to hit. The moment they stepped into the newsroom, Dalpo spotted the haggard faces of exhausted reporters, dark circles under their eyes, and coffee cups stacked like battle trophies. It was clear this beat would be nothing short of war. He ran into an old classmate, Chan-Su, now a police officer, who greeted him with a familiar grin. They shared a quick round of pleasantries, catching up on their separate lives and career paths, a nostalgic flicker crossing their eyes. Just then, Inha arrived. And when Chan-Su learned they were there to gather information, he smiled and offered to help, leading them to the station's designated rest area. As he swung open the door, WGI's Dalpo And Ina, along with MSC's bum Joe and his senior, rushed inside, only to freeze in disbelief. What stood before them was less a rest area and more a musty claustrophobic closet, barely fit for storage, let alone 4 ambitious rookie reporters. Bum Joe, who'd grown up in silk sheets and chandelier-lit rooms, looked particularly aghast, but there was no time to complain. They split up to search for leads, peppering various officers with questions, hoping for even a sliver of newsworthy information. But after a full circuit of interviews, they came up empty. To add insult to injury, a senior officer scolded them for their clumsy intrusion. The defeat almost crushed Bum Joe's spirits, until Ina noticed something for the first time. The rich boy wasn't giving up. His frustration was real, and so was his determination. She gave him a nod of respect. Meanwhile, Dalpo and his senior were working with surgical precision. Dalpo had managed to secure a promising lead from a surprisingly cooperative officer. With no better option, Ina returned to Chan Su, her old friend, and after some good-natured pleading, he finally relented. He mentioned a peculiar case, a woman who had collapsed and died from overexertion during a workout session. It was something Ina and Bum Joe quickly split up, one to the hospital, the other to the gym, ready to chase down their first real story. What they didn't know was that Dalpo and his team had locked onto the same case. Now, 4 reporters, 2 rival networks, 1 story. The race was on. All paths converged at the gym. But the owner, wary of bad press, flatly refused to hand over the security footage. Desperate, the reporters tried different tactics: sympathy, reasoning, pressure. Finally, the owner caved, but only a little. He allowed them to watch the footage. No copies allowed. Ina and Bum Joe accepted the terms, pulling out notepads and pens to take detailed notes. WGI's 1G started to consider begging again when Dalpo calmly pulled out his phone. He had secretly recorded the entire clip. 1G was stunned. His junior was slick. They had the upper hand. The footage showed a woman weighing over 330 pounds, furiously exercising, pushing herself to the edge until she collapsed. Early reports indicated that her husband had left her for a slimmer woman, sparking a desperate obsession with weight loss. 1G couldn't wait to air the exclusive story, ready to frame it as a cautionary tale of vanity gone too far. But Dalpo hesitated. Something didn't sit right. He remembered Ina's words, "You're making a big mistake." With a gut feeling pulling him away from the newsroom, Dalpo headed straight to the funeral home there. He met the deceased woman's daughter, a frail young girl in a wheelchair, her face pale, her body clearly ravaged by illness. Dalpo introduced himself, gently handed over his card, and asked if she'd be willing to speak. She explained she had already spoken to reporters, but then paused. Looking into his eyes, she said softly, "I'll tell you the truth." She revealed that she suffered from severe liver cirrhosis. Her mother had planned to donate part of her liver to save her, but to do so, she needed to lose 66 pounds in 1 month. That's why she had pushed herself so mercilessly, not for beauty, not for vanity, but to save her daughter's life. Dalpo stood frozen, his mouth dry before he could stop it. The WGI report aired. Earlier today, a woman obsessed with beauty and driven by unrealistic standards tragically collapsed at the gym. "No!" a voice screamed from the television. Dalpo turned. It was the girl, her face streaked with tears, her voice shaking. "That's not true! My mom did it for me!" And in that moment, the weight of careless reporting slammed into him like a freight train. Dalpo was drowning in guilt, the kind that clings to your bones and doesn't let go. Just as the weight of his mistake settled like a storm cloud over him, the rival network, led by none other than Inha's mother, aired the full story, the real story. It turned out they had uncovered the facts all along, but deliberately waited. They held their fire until WGN broadcast the incomplete version, and then boom, delivered the fatal blow. It was a tactical ambush, and it worked. The fallout was brutal. WGN's credibility crumbled overnight, and Dalpo's name was at the center of it. His superiors, livid, demanded an explanation, but Dalpo was nowhere to be found. Where was he? He was alone in the very room where he once stood so confidently berating Inha for being too emotional, too reckless, too naive for journalism. Now he had made the very mistake he'd accused her of. He'd allowed pain and pride to cloud his judgment. And just like the ruthless reporters who destroyed his own family years ago, he had harmed an innocent family. His childhood trauma had come full circle. Later that evening, back home, Dalpo vented to his grandfather. The pay was miserable. The travel endless, the pressure crushing. He wanted to quit, return to the comfort of a taxi driver's life. But his grandfather looked at him quietly and asked, "Do you really not want to do it, or are you just running away?" The question hit harder than any scolding. It echoed in Dalpo's mind, long into the night, staring at the screen of his phone, lined with dozens of missed calls and unread messages. He remembered the promise he made to Inha, his fist clenched with resolve. He returned to the station, ready for a storm. Instead, he got something unexpected. His boss, cool as ever, said, "You made a mistake. One that any reporter could make. This time, we'll let it slide. But don't let it happen again." There was no yelling, no public shaming, just a chance to redeem himself. And maybe that was worse, because it meant he had to rise above the guilt, not wallow in it. Dalpo also learned that the deceased woman's daughter had received immense support from the public. The truth had finally reached the people, and in that there was at least a sliver of justice. The next day, at the police station, he spotted Inha pestering Officer Chan Su about an arson case. Intrigued, he glanced at the files and brushed it off. But when Inha stumbled, walking away, both Dalpo and Boom Jo reached out instinctively. She chose Boom Jo, ignoring Dalpo's hand. That moment lingered, heavier than it should have. Dalpo turned his attention back to the case. Something about it felt off. He scanned the details again and froze. A phone number caught his eye, one he recognized from his own contacts. His instincts screamed at him to act. He called the number and arranged a meeting in the town square, claiming it was about compensation for a damaged car. But his real goal was clear, to uncover who was behind these recent, mysterious incidents. And then a man stepped into view and Dalpo's world tilted. The face was unmistakable. It was him, his long-lost brother Jong. For a moment, Dalpo couldn't breathe. The man introduced himself casually. "Ah, I'm Jong," and even though his brother didn't recognize him, Dalpo knew immediately this wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't fate, it was revenge, and his brother was orchestrating it with surgical precision. All the recent victims were tied to the smear campaign that destroyed their father's life, and Jong had quietly struck them down, one by one. Dalpo chose not to reveal himself, not yet. Instead, he extended his hand. "I'm Dalpo," he said. As Chan Su approached from a distance, Dalpo quickly pulled Jong away, leading him into a local snack bar. Under the pretense of settling the car matter, Jong refused any payment and instead said with a smirk, "A little scuffle's a good way to make friends. Consider us friends now." Outside, Jong paused, eyeing Dalpo closely. The resemblance was uncanny. "If my younger brother hadn't died," he muttered under his breath, "I would have thought you were him." And Dalpo simply smiled, hiding the storm that raged inside. "Young Dalpo." He ventured gently, using the Korean word for older brother. "Can I call you that?" Jae-myung smiled, clearly pleased. "Of course." With a simple nod, he drove off, watching his brother disappear into the distance. Dalpo felt a pang of longing so deep it took his breath away. Impulsively, he hailed a taxi and followed quietly from afar. There was so much he wanted to say, so many truths left unspoken. But deep down, he feared what Jae-myung had become, revenge. Once a righteous flame, now threatened to turn his brother into something darker. At Jae-myung's doorstep, Dalpo hesitated. His hand rose to press the doorbell, once, twice, 3 times, and yet he couldn't bring himself to do it. He wasn't ready, not yet. Elsewhere, a routine traffic stop took a terrifying turn. A man, clearly panicked, suddenly sped off, barreling through the streets like a madman. Officers gave chase, sirens wailing, but the driver refused to stop. On another stretch of road, a small boy began crossing the street, slowly, cautiously. He spotted the speeding truck too late. In a moment of panic, he tripped and fell. The truck, now wildly out of control, flipped onto its side and skidded directly toward the child. Just when tragedy seemed certain, a massive water truck thundered in from the side, slamming into the runaway vehicle and stopping it in its tracks. The driver of the water truck stumbled out, breathless and bruised, but smiled as he saw the child alive. Then, without warning, he collapsed onto the boy, unconscious. Inha's news crew had caught every second on camera. The dramatic rescue aired immediately, and the country was captivated. The hero behind the wheel of the water truck, none other than Ki Jae-myung. Though he had only minor injuries, Jae-myung was quickly swarmed. Inha approached, handing him her business card and politely requesting an exclusive interview. He took the card, his expression darkening as he read her name, recognizing her as the daughter of the very reporter who had destroyed his family. He smiled, not kindly, but with eerie calm, and agreed. Meanwhile, Dalpo recognized the damaged water truck. Panic overtook him. It was his brother's. Frantically, he searched for answers and learned that the driver had been taken to the hospital. Without wasting a second, he rushed there. He arrived just in time. Jong was in the middle of his interview. Recounting his past, he revealed that he'd seen the boy in the street as his own long-lost younger brother. That's why he hadn't hesitated. He then explained how a single news report, one filled with lies, had painted his brave father as a villain and led to the disintegration of his family. Inha listened intently, her fists clenched. She realized Jong wasn't just a hero, he was a victim. She demanded the name of the unethical reporter who had twisted the truth. Just as Jong was about to answer, Dalpo stormed in and yanked her out of the room. Infuriated, Inha accused him of sabotaging her exclusive. But Dalpo, breathless and shaking, warned her, "Stay away from him. He's dangerous." She looked at him incredulously. How can someone who risked their life for a child be dangerous? Dalpo couldn't reveal the truth. Not yet. He couldn't say, "He's my brother," or "He's seeking revenge." All he could do was beg, "Please, trust me." His sincerity finally broke through. Inha nodded, "Okay, I'll keep my distance." Relieved, Dalpo watched as she and her crew walked away. Meanwhile, Jong turned to greet the cameraman. His demeanor softened. "Long time? No see?" he said casually. The cameraman stiffened, clearly caught off guard by the encounter. Then, Jong glanced down at the card Inha had given him. "Reporter Song? Is that her?" The cameraman hesitated. Then slowly, he nodded. "Yes, that's her." Jong's smile deepened. "Perfect." Because of this incident, he mused, "I finally got to meet reporter Song's daughter. How fascinating." During the televised interview, Jong calmly recounted how one unethical reporter had twisted the truth about his firefighter father, turning a selfless hero into a national disgrace. The apology issued by the news station years later was hollow, lacking remorse and dripping with insincerity. And Dalpo, watching from the shadows, knew then his brother had no intention of stopping. Haunted by grief and shame, he brought flowers to his father's memorial, where a photograph of their once happy family sat surrounded by heartfelt apologies from strangers. Moved by the truth, he stood silently, overcome with emotion. Then footsteps echoed behind him. He quickly wiped his eyes and turned around. It was Jong, still oblivious to the fact that the reporter standing before him was his own brother. Dalpo, he assumed this stranger was just another mourner, until he learned his name. Instantly, his demeanor hardened, cold and bitter. He even threw the flowers Dalpo had brought onto the ground, walking away. But Dalpo wasn't done. He caught up to him and calmly asked, "Do you know Gyodong?" Jong froze, his face drained of color. That was the man he had trapped in the manhole years ago. "I don't know him," he lied stiffly. But Dalpo wasn't fooled. He pushed further. "That man falsely accused your father. His two accomplices have also met tragic ends." Jong stopped in his tracks, his voice sharp and unrepentant. "They deserved it. Death isn't even enough to repay what they did to my father." Dalpo pounced. "You speak as if you're certain Gyodong is dead, but I never said he was missing. Only, how do you know? And more importantly, what do you really want? An apology or revenge?" Jong's voice dropped ice cold. "If it's one or the other, I choose revenge." Without another word, he snatched Dalpo's phone and hurled it into the fire. But Dalpo didn't flinch. The phone had only been a decoy. The real recording device was hidden in his tie clip. He never intended to turn his brother in, only to try and save him from himself. Meanwhile, the cameraman from Jong's recent interview approached Inha and showed her footage from 13 years ago. She stared in horror as the truth played before her. The reporter who had destroyed Jong's family was her mother, the mother she had long idolized. The illusion shattered, the image of the woman she admired collapsed in an instant. The cameraman, sensing danger, warned her. Something felt off about Jong, and she needed to be cautious. Inha nodded numbly, her mind racing. Then something caught her eye, a pair of shoes in the video. Plain, unremarkable, but strikingly familiar. The cameraman mentioned they belonged to Jong's younger brother. Inha's breath hitched. Dalpo, she remembered those shoes. Dalpo had a pair just like them. Rushing home, she showed the shoe to her grandfather, and with quiet resolve, he revealed the truth. Those shoes were the reason he took Dalpo in years ago. Inha's mind pieced it all together. Why Dalpo had suddenly grown distant. Why he constantly teased her. Why he had been so enraged during their debate about journalism. And why he had so fiercely opposed her becoming a reporter. It was all rooted in the pain he'd buried for years. Her eyes welled up with tears, her voice trembling as she confronted him. Your real name, it's Jong, isn't it? Dalpo's face twisted in agony. How did you know? He whispered quietly, the pain of his past etched deep into every word. The power of public opinion could lift people to mythical heights, turning flawed individuals into celebrated heroes, but it could also destroy, just as easily. It had crushed a firefighter's legacy, reduced a noble man to a scapegoat, and shattered an innocent family. Now that she knew her mother's unforgivable role in that tragedy, Inha made a vow. She would seek justice for Dalpo and do what her mother never had. Tell the truth. During her mother's high-profile public speaking event, during the final Q&A session, Ina rose to her feet, her voice shaking but resolute. 13 years ago, she began. During the fire incident, you chose sensationalism over truth. Your reports didn't just inform, they ignited. They destroyed. You drove Ki Ha-myung's family to ruin. The audience murmured, restless, the air thick with tension. But Inha wasn't finished. She took a deep breath, her voice growing stronger. Because of your misleading reports, she continued, an entire nation turned its back on an innocent family. Don't you see how dangerous, irresponsible journalism can be? Reporting without truth, reporting driven by drama alone, it can ruin lives. Her mother, expression unreadable, still refused to accept fault, instead, deflecting the blame onto the man with Pinocchio Syndrome. It was a chilling moment, one that reminded Ina of her own debate with Dalpo, the one that had once silenced her. She looked toward him, now borrowing his very words. Everyone believes reporters just deliver facts, she said. But whether you're a reporter or someone who can't lie like me, our words carry power. People trust them blindly. We have a responsibility to that truth. Her honesty hit like a thunderclap. The very woman once feared in the newsroom now stood speechless. Even the executives watching were taken aback. Only reporter Yoon supported Ina, publicly praising her bravery after the event. Backstage, Ina's heart pounded with anxiety, fearing she might have just ended her career. Dalpo found her and asked, "Why did you do that?" Her response was simple, "I couldn't stand it anymore." He looked at her intently. "Do you not care how your mother feels?" Ina turned away, avoiding his gaze, but he gently took her arm, not letting her leave. "I do care," she confessed, "but that doesn't make her right, and if you want to go after her, I won't stop you." As they parted, Dalpo's phone rang. It was Bong Jo warning him Jae-myung might be at the MSC building. Dalpo's face darkened, and he ran. He wasn't wrong. Jae-myung had been waiting to the moment Inha stepped out of the elevator. He cornered her, demanding answers. "How do you know so much about my family?" he growled. But Inha refused to betray Dalpo. Just then, Dalpo arrived, pulling Jae-myung back. "Are you okay?" he asked her, his eyes filled with concern. Jae-myung turned to him, rage and confusion burning in his eyes. They struggled briefly, and then Dalpo finally shouted, "Hyung, it's me, Ha-myung." Jae-myung froze, unable to comprehend what he just heard. Inha stepped forward, confirming the truth, his voice trembling. Jae-myung looked into his brother's eyes. "You lied to me," he said. "You said Dad would come back. You said you'd come back. We'd watch the fireworks together. You promised." The memories came flooding back like a dam breaking 13 years ago. He had promised his younger brother he'd return, but an accident on the way back home had left him too late to stop their mother, too late to save their family. And all this time he had believed Ha-myung was dead. But here he was standing before him. The brother he had mourned for over a decade was alive. Jae-myung embraced him tightly, tears falling freely from both their eyes. Later, they sat in a quiet restaurant. Jae-myung remembered everything, even the little detail of how his brother liked his pizza, more vegetables than meat. Dalpo smiled, touched by the memory, as Jae-myung asked him about the life he had lived. He quietly shared the story of his rescue by the old man with dementia, the one who had given him a new name, a second chance, and a reason to keep living. People approached Jae-myung for autographs, snapping photos and calling his name, their cheers echoing in the air as flashbulbs popped all around him. Standing just a few steps away, Dalpo watched in silence, a bitter ache tightening in his chest. His brother, the same man who had lost everything, was now being hailed as a national hero. Jim let out a dry chuckle. The irony wasn't lost on him. "It's strange, isn't it?" he said. "Reporter Song ruined our family, and now she's the reason people call me a hero." His eyes met Dalpo's as he urged him to continue living as Dalpo, not as Ha Myung, and to keep their brotherhood a secret. But Dalpo's heart was heavy, confusion and fear swirling within him, and finally he asked the question that had haunted him. "Did you cause those deaths?" Jim didn't hesitate. "Yes, Ha Myung." His voice like a cold blade, confirming what Dalpo had feared most. Though he'd clung to a flicker of hope, the truth cut deep and he couldn't bring himself to turn his brother in. Not yet. Back at the newsroom, during the editorial meeting, reporter Yoon suggested turning the spotlight onto Jim at the police station. She'd overheard whispers officers were quietly discussing him as a possible suspect in a series of disappearances. The idea of exposing the dark truth behind a national hero sent a thrill through the newsroom. This could be the story of the decade. Their boss wasted no time assigning the story to reporter Yoon, but Dalpo panicked. He approached his boss behind closed doors and confessed the truth about his brother. He promised he'd convince Jim to come forward voluntarily, creating a bigger scoop and a more responsible story. Intrigued by the offer, the boss handed the assignment to Dalpo and pulled Yoon off the story. Furious, Yoon confronted him. "How dare you steal my story?" Dalpo could only apologize, leaving her fuming and drowning her frustration in a bottle of soju. But fate had more in store. That very night, Yoon woke up in the newsroom, disheveled and hungover, only to overhear breaking news. Jae-myung was about to give an exclusive interview. Thrilled, she rushed to share the info with Dalpo, but his concern deepened. He had just received an anonymous tip accusing his brother of murder. He rushed to confront Jae-myung. "Are you planning to take your revenge during the interview?" he demanded. His brother confessed without hesitation. Dalpo pleaded with him again, begged him to turn himself in to avoid more tragedy. "I can't lose you again," he said, his voice cracking. But Jae-myung stood firm, his resolve unshaken. Knowing how much Dalpo cared for In-ha, he refused to drag him into his mess. He turned and walked away. But Dalpo wasn't done. He confronted him once more, this time with fire in his eyes. "I've already given up on In-ha," he said. The words stung, but they were necessary. "If you won't let me break the story, I'll take the evidence to the police myself." Faced with the ultimatum, Jae-myung finally gave in. They would work together to expose the real villain, the woman whose lies had shattered lives all those years ago. The malicious reporter, completely unaware of what was coming, prepared for her exclusive interview with Jae-myung, expecting it to be her crowning moment. The broadcast began. Her plan was simple. Use old footage to glorify Jae-myung's story. Play the clip of his desperate plea from 13 years ago and let the public fall in love with the hero she helped build. But as the applause rose, Jae-myung's expression shifted. He turned to her calmly and asked, "Why didn't you air the full, unedited version?" That clip wasn't for sympathy. It was a desperate cry for truth and justice. And the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. The moment her manipulation was exposed, reporter Song's face lost its smug composure. She remembered it all too well, how she had carefully, deliberately chosen only the most emotionally charged clips from Jae-myung's interview all those years ago, stitching them together into a weaponized narrative designed to stir public outrage and skyrocket her ratings. But now the tables had turned. Jae-myung leaned forward, his voice cold and deliberate. "Reporter Song," he said, each word laced with venom. "You used clever editing to turn my father into a villain. How interesting," she stammered, trying to deflect, blaming it on the immaturity of the media industry back then, offering a half-hearted apology. But Jae-myung wasn't done. "Truly fascinating," he sneered, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "You turned a heroic firefighter into a fugitive, and me, a dangerous man, into a national hero." The studio fell into stunned silence, quickly followed by hushed murmurs rippling through the crowd. "If you don't believe me," Jae-myung declared, locking eyes with the camera, "watch the news." Right on cue, a live report from Dalpo interrupted the broadcast. He was on site, standing at the very locations tied to Jae-myung's revenge campaign. Calmly, methodically, he laid bare the truth behind the man the public had just crowned a hero. The reaction was instant shock, disbelief, betrayal. Just moments ago, the nation had celebrated Jae-myung. Now they were watching him be unmasked as a criminal. And Dalpo wasn't finished. Facing the camera, he revealed his own truth. My name is Ki Ha My Young. At home, his grandfather and brother sat frozen, the name hanging in the air like thunder. After all these years, the boy they raised had come forward, not as Dalpo, the adopted son, but as the true Ha Ma Young. Back at the station, police cars waited. Jong stepped out of the building and into the night, where Dalpo stood waiting. The two brothers reunited after 13 painful years, only to face another heartbreaking separation. Dalpo's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again, filled with guilt. But Jong gently held his face, his voice soft, yet resolute. "This is just the beginning. From here on, you have to face Songcha alone. Show her and me what a real reporter is." He knew he wouldn't be able to defeat someone like her. That mission now belonged to his brother. That night, Dalpo returned home and began packing his things. The weight of his next steps settled heavily on his shoulders. He stood before his grandfather to formally end their adoptive ties, not out of anger, but necessity. He couldn't stay, not while his next battle would pit him against the mother of the woman he loved behind a closed door. Inha listened. Each step he took away from her echoed in her chest like a breaking heart. Silently, she wept. Elsewhere, Jong was escorted to each of his crime scenes for formal identification. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. It was déjà vu, only this time, the chaos wasn't aimed at his family. It was justice, seeking balance, and the woman at the center of it all, the one who had twisted a hero into a villain and turned a broken man into a celebrated icon, now stood exposed. Reporter Song had never imagined her national hero would confess his crimes on live television. Never thought her obsession with ratings would one day turn on her. While the broadcast didn't immediately destroy her career, the cracks had been carved, deep ones. Her credibility took a blow that couldn't be ignored. Soon, more skeletons tumbled from her closet. Old reports resurfaced, and her past fabrications were dug up like buried landmines. The public erupted in fury. Social media exploded. Protests gathered outside her company's headquarters, their chants calling for justice, for accountability, and then came another voice. Mr. Park, once the proud owner of a modest bus company, stepped forward. One of his drivers had embezzled funds and died under suspicious circumstances. Reporter Song had pounced, fabricating a story that the driver had taken his own life out of guilt after being fired. The public turned on Mr. Park. Boycotts followed. His business crumbled into ruin, and now his voice joined the chorus of victims seeking truth, not just from the courts, but from the very media that claimed to stand for it. Just when the dust had barely begun to settle, another storm began brewing. Mr. Park, now armed with the driver's death certificate, declaring the cause of death as a heart attack, marched into the spotlight, demanding what he had waited years for, an apology, and, more importantly, a public retraction. This revelation sent shockwaves through the newsroom. Reporter Song, already under fire, was now drowning in it. Her superiors were livid. They discovered she hadn't even bothered to verify the cause of death. No cross-checking, not even a coroner's report. They exploded in disbelief. Threats of her removal as chief editor loomed. Desperate to control the damage, they dispatched Inha and Byumjo to investigate. Meanwhile, Dalpo and Yurei were also assigned to the same story, setting the stage for a high-stakes truth chase. Dalpo, sensing the gravity of the situation, quickly informed his brother. If this story aired with the truth intact, it would be the final nail in Reporter Song's career. Inha and Byumjo reached Mr. Park first, hoping to uncover the facts. Dalpo and Yurei arrived just moments later. Surprisingly, Mr. Park agreed to speak with all four of them. Sitting down, he revealed something shocking. He'd recently spoken to the driver's brother and learned that the man had actually died of a stroke, not suicide. And to back it up, he presented the death certificate. With the document in hand, the reporters split up to verify each piece of the puzzle. Inha took charge of authenticating the certificate. Byumjo interviewed the driver's co-workers. Yurei set off to question the driver's family, and Dalpo, with fire in his eyes, decided to confront the woman at the center of it all, Reporter Song. Dalpo didn't hold back. "On what basis did you conclude it was suicide?" he demanded. She immediately got defensive. "There were many signs," she argued. "Did you see the death certificate?" he pressed. "We had testimony," she insisted. "Did you see the death certificate?" he repeated louder this time. "We found a note," she tried again. "Answer the question. Did you actually see it?" Dalpo fired back. For the first time, the usually composed and calculating reporter was flustered. Her mask was cracking and Dalpo could see it. Soon after, Byumjo returned with more ammo. The colleagues confirmed the driver had chronic heart problems. Ray also reported that the driver's brother never believed it was suicide. It all lined up. All that remained was In-ha's confirmation of the certificate. With that, the truth would crush reporter Song's lies once and for all. But In-ha didn't reply. She didn't answer Dalthbo's calls. All she sent was a message, "I'm fine." But Dalthbo had heard those words before. Right after she cried over her mother something was wrong, he rushed to find her and spotted her outside the newsroom, visibly torn, holding a stack of papers. In-ha had discovered something. Something damning. The certificate Mr. Park provided was fake. The original obtained from the doctor revealed the unthinkable truth. The driver had indeed committed suicide. She was about to destroy the forged document when Dalthbo appeared. Startled, In-ha turned and ran. Dalthbo chased after her, shouting, demanding to know what was going on. She stopped, breathless, unable to speak. "What happened?" he asked again, trying to piece it together. Was it false? Was the report wrong? In-ha finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "The certificate, it was forged. He really did take his own life." Dalthbo froze. The ground seemed to fall out from beneath him. They had been so close to exposing her. And now the truth had pulled the rug out from under their feet. Arriving home, Dalthbo found his grandfather and brother already there waiting. He had hoped to keep his distance to live in quiet solitude, but 13 years of unspoken love and unbreakable bonds weren't so easily undone. His grandfather, worried about Dalthbo braving the cold alone, had come to check on him. He bustled around the apartment, sealing windows against the chill, adjusting the heater and nagging lovingly about eating proper meals. Dalthbo tried to hide it, but his heart softened. This was love, plain and unconditional. His brother, too, left behind the neighbor's phone number, insisting Dalthbo call if anything ever went wrong. Before leaving, his grandfather clasped his shoulder, looking him in the eye with quiet certainty. "I will never abandon you. No matter what anyone says, you will always be my son." Later, alone in the silence of his apartment, Dalthbo opened the bag his grandfather had left behind. Inside, warmth in its simplest form. A scarf, a steaming pimmin, and a handwritten note reminding him to eat on time and take care of himself. He clutched the scarf tightly, overcome by the warmth, not of wool, but of family. The next morning, outside the gates of reporter Song's company, an angry crowd of protesters had gathered, demanding an apology. As her car pulled in, they surged forward, blocking her path. She stepped out, calm and composed, even as reporters fired question after question about the inaccuracies in the Mr. Park story. Watching from the sidelines, Dalthbo felt the sting of a memory, his own past, those very same flashing cameras, that very same unforgiving chaos. But this time, he felt no vindication, no victory. If he stood silent now, he was no better than those who had once destroyed his own family. He stepped forward, producing the original certificate. He addressed the crowd. "Mr. Park lied," he announced clearly. "The real certificate shows the cause of death was a drug overdose. Why did you forge it, Mr. Park?" "Exposed!" Mr. Park panicked and fled. All eyes turned to Dalthbo. Reporter Song stared at him, stunned. Why was he helping her? "I did what a reporter should do," Dalthbo replied. "What you should have done 13 years ago." His words cut deep, but not out of spite, out of principle. And in that moment, Dalthbo had fulfilled the promise he made to his brother, to show the world what it meant to be a real reporter. Ina, watching from afar, felt a quiet, bittersweet satisfaction. The truth, no matter how painful, had finally been revealed. To everyone's surprise, reporter Song later held a press conference with cameras rolling and the nation watching. She apologized publicly for her past misconduct. She announced her resignation as chief editor and expressed genuine remorse for her actions. Even Dalthbo was taken aback by helping the person he once called his enemy. He had inspired her to take responsibility, a burden she'd evaded for over a decade. As she packed up her office, she dropped a box of old belongings. Inha knelt to help her. "What will you do next?" she asked gently. The reporter didn't answer. She only gave Inha a look filled with something like hope. "Be a good reporter, not like me." Later, under the gray sky of a quiet evening, Dalthbo found Inha for the first time. No more lies, no more silence. He apologized for everything. His anger, his coldness, his distance. Then finally, he said what had been on his heart all along. "I love you, Inha." Didn't blame him for the past, but she hesitated, unsure if their love could survive the legacy of her mother. Dalthbo didn't let her go. He pulled her into a quiet embrace, holding her tightly, not just with his arms, but with a heart that had finally learned to forgive, to heal. and to love again. Time flew by, and as the new year peeked around the corner, Dalpo and Inha had not only found their stride in journalism, they had also found their rhythm in love. Though they lived in separate homes, their mornings always began together, commuting side by side, their conversations spilling onto phone calls even after they reached their respective news stations. It was subtle, it was sweet, and it was unmistakable. They were in love. Then came a moment that would change everything. Dalpo's brother quietly approached their grandfather, placing in his hands old childhood photos of Dalpo and Inha, soft with time and full of memories. With a gentle voice, he spoke of Dalpo's silent love, a love that had lasted 10 long years, a love he had buried under the title of uncle, out of respect for their father's memory. The grandfather listened, his heart full, even though they had previously agreed to annul the adoption. In spirit, he realized they were still legally bound as family. But he had an idea, a bold, beautiful idea. The very next day, the grandfather called Dalpo to meet him. Dalpo arrived, curious and unsuspecting. "What's going on, Grandpa?" he asked. The old man's voice trembled as he pulled out official documents with heartfelt words and tearful eyes. He explained that he was annulling the adoption formally, legally restoring Dalpo's birth name, his identity, his freedom. "Thank you, Grandpa," Dalpo said, voice cracking. Then he corrected himself with a smile. "Thank you, Dad." They embraced tightly. Two hearts connected, not by blood, but by something even stronger. Gratitude and love forged through time. And then came one of the most joyful chapters of all. Wedding dress shopping. Dalpo's grandfather tagged along, beaming like a child in a candy store, while Dalpo's brother turned full paparazzi, snapping pictures like he was born for it. Amid the flurry of fabric and laughter, Inha turned to Dalpo with a question that had lingered in her heart since middle school. "Why did you fight for me back then?" Dalpo smiled, a twinkle in his eyes. "Because I liked you, and that was all there was to it. Simple, sincere, everlasting." The story closed on the image of their wedding, elegant, heartfelt, a celebration of two souls who overcame every obstacle to be together. And as they walked down the aisle, hand in hand, we were reminded that the truth, when spoken from the heart, will always lead us home. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more unforgettable love stories.